The blood on Clara Richardson's hands was just bringing new life into the world. But the screams echoing through the dusty streets of Jerome Junction, Arizona territory, made her heart race as she held the newborn boy against his mother's chest in the cramped adobe house. It was July 1883, and the copper mining town sat perched on Mingus Mountain, a place where hope seemed as scarce as water in summer. Clara had arrived 6 months ago from Philadelphia, a trained midwife seeking to escape the suffocating expectations of Eastern society and a failed engagement to a banker's son who wanted a decorative wife, not a woman with calloused hands and a calling to serve. At 24 years old, she had delivered 43 babies since settling in this rough town where most women gave birth alone or died trying. "You have a beautiful son, Mrs. Henderson," Clara said softly, wiping the infant's face with gentle efficiency. The mother, exhausted and pale, managed a weak smile as Clara wrapped the baby in clean cotton cloth. The screaming outside had stopped, replaced by the sound of horses and rough male voices. "That will be another fight over mining claims," Mrs. Henderson whispered, her voice hoarse. "This town gets meaner every day." Clara said nothing, but she agreed silently. Jerome Junction had grown from a small settlement to a chaotic boomtown almost overnight when copper deposits were discovered. Men poured in from everywhere, most of them rough and desperate, looking to strike it rich or die trying. The town had 3 saloons, 1 general store, 1 church that doubled as a schoolhouse, and exactly 1 midwife, which meant Clara never had a moment's rest. She stayed with Mrs. Henderson for another 2 hours, making sure the bleeding had stopped and that the mother could nurse. The father, a tired-looking miner with kind eyes, paid her with a small leather pouch of copper nuggets, the only currency most people had in this town. "Thank you, Miss Richardson," he said earnestly. "You brought hope into this house today." Clara smiled and gathered her medical bag, stepping out into the brutal Arizona heat. The sun blazed overhead, turning the red rocks surrounding the town into shimmering mirages. She walked carefully down the steep dirt road, her navy blue dress already covered in dust, despite her best efforts. Her boarding house was on the other side of town, past the main street with its false front buildings and constant noise. She was passing the Lucky Copper Saloon when a man stumbled out directly into her path. Clara jumped back, but not before he grabbed her arm to steady himself, reeking of whiskey and sweat. "Well now, what do we have here?" he slurred, his grip tightening. "A pretty little thing all alone." "Let me go," Clara said firmly, trying to pull away. Her heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. She had dealt with drunk miners before. Not so fast. "Why don't you come have a drink with old Charlie?" the lady said. "Let go." The voice was calm but carried an edge of steel that made even the drunk man pause. Clara looked up to see a cowboy standing a few feet away, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of sage. Dust covered his clothes, and he wore a wide-brimmed hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair. He could not have been much older than Clara herself, perhaps 26 or 27. "This is none of your business, cowboy," Charlie said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "I am making it my business." The cowboy's voice remained level, but he took a step closer. "Now let the lady go and sleep it off before you do something stupid." Charlie released Clara's arm and stumbled back toward the saloon, muttering curses under his breath. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself as she adjusted her medical bag. "Thank you," she said, meeting the cowboy's eyes. Up close, she could see a scar above his left eyebrow and the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. "That was kind of you." "Just doing what is right, madam." He tipped his hat respectfully. Though I have to say, a lady should not be walking alone in this part of town. Clara bristled slightly. I am a midwife. I go where I am needed, regardless of what part of town it happens to be. A slight smile tugged at his mouth. I meant no offense. I am Gideon Lewis, recently hired as foreman at the Verde Valley Ranch outside town, just came in for supplies. Clara Richardson. She softened her tone. And I appreciate your help, Mr. Lewis. I truly do. Call me Gideon. Mr. Lewis sounds like someone much older and more respectable than I will ever be. His smile was genuine now, reaching his eyes. Can I walk you somewhere safe? I would hate for Charlie to bother you again. Clara hesitated. She prided herself on her independence, but she was also practical. Jerome Junction could be dangerous, especially for women. I am staying at Mrs. Cooper's boarding house on Mill Street. I know it. That is a fair walk uphill. They set off together, Clara acutely aware of his presence beside her. Most men in town treated her with either crude disrespect or awkward reverence, seeing her as either prey or a kind of frontier saint. Gideon seemed different, walking at a comfortable pace, his silence companionable rather than oppressive. So you are a ranch foreman, Clara said after a few minutes, curiosity getting the better of her. That is a long way from town. About 8 miles. The Verde Valley Ranch has been struggling since the old foreman got himself shot in a card game last month. The owner, Mr. Patterson, needed someone who knows cattle and is not afraid of hard work. I have been working ranches since I was 15, drifting mostly, but I am ready to settle somewhere. Why here? Arizona territory is not exactly civilized. Gideon laughed, a warm sound that surprised her. No, madam, it certainly is not. But I grew up in Texas, worked in New Mexico, spent time in Colorado. I guess I like places where you can see the horizon and know that your work matters. Out here, you build something or you do not survive. There is an honesty to that. Clara considered his words as they climbed the steep street. I think I understand that. Back in Philadelphia, everything was about appearances and social position. Here, when I deliver a baby, I know I have made a real difference. That mother and child are alive because of what I know and what I can do with my hands. Nothing else matters. That is a noble calling. It is necessary work, Clara corrected. Women have been birthing babies since Eve, but too many die when they do not have to. I learned from the best midwives in Philadelphia, studied medical texts most doctors have never read. I wanted to go where I could do the most good. They reached the boarding house, a 2-story wooden structure that had been painted white but was now faded to gray by the relentless sun. Mrs. Cooper, a stout widow who ruled her establishment with iron-fisted kindness, was sweeping the porch. Miss Richardson, you have been gone since before dawn, she called out. The Henderson baby, a healthy boy, arrived at noon. Praise be, and who is this gentleman? Gideon Lewis, madam, Gideon said, removing his hat. Just making sure Miss Richardson got home safely after she had some trouble with a drunk on Main Street. Mrs. Cooper's expression darkened. This town is getting worse by the day. Well, Mr. Lewis, you have my thanks. Will you stay for supper? It is not much, but we always have enough. Gideon glanced at Clara, who found herself hoping he would say yes. I would not want to impose. Nonsense. Any man who looks after our Clara is welcome at my table. Supper is at 6 sharp. Do not be late. Gideon smiled. Yes, madam. He left to complete his errands, and Clara went inside, suddenly conscious of her dusty, blood-stained dress. She had 3 hours before supper, which gave her time to wash and change. As she scrubbed her hands and face with water from the basin in her small room, she caught herself smiling in the mirror and stopped, surprised at her own reaction. She barely knew this man. He was just being polite, probably felt obligated to accept Mrs. Cooper's forceful invitation. There was no reason to read anything more into it. Still, as she changed into her better dress, a soft gray cotton with pearl buttons, she took extra care with her hair, pinning it up neatly and allowing a few dark curls to frame her face. Mrs. Cooper's boarding house had 6 permanent residents besides Clara and the landlady herself. 2 unmarried minors, an elderly prospector who rarely left his room, a schoolteacher named Miss Hartley, a clerk from the general store, and a widow who worked as a seamstress. They all gathered for supper in the dining room, a cramped space that somehow accommodated a large table. Gideon arrived exactly at 6, cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt. He fit right in, chatting easily with the miners about cattle prices and water rights, listening respectfully to Miss Hartley's complaints about unruly students, and complimenting Mrs. Cooper's roast beef until the widow blushed with pleasure. Clara found herself watching him throughout the meal. He had good manners but was not pretentious, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he moved and spoke. When he caught her looking, he smiled, and she quickly looked down at her plate, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. After supper, Mrs. Cooper shooed everyone out to the front porch, where the evening air was finally cooling. Clara sat on the steps, watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Gideon settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "This is beautiful country," he said quietly. "Harsh but beautiful. It grows on you," Clara agreed. "When I first arrived, I thought I had made a terrible mistake. Everything was so different from home, but now I cannot imagine being anywhere else. No family back in Philadelphia. My parents died when I was 19. Typhoid fever. I lived with an aunt after that, but we never got along. She thought midwifery was beneath our family's dignity." Clara surprised herself with the admission. She rarely talked about her past. "What about you? Any family?" "My mother died giving birth to my youngest sister when I was 12. My father raised the 4 of us as best he could, but ranch life is hard. My older brother took over the family place in Texas. My sisters both married. My father passed 2 years ago. Heart just gave out one day while he was mending fences. I am sorry. Life on the frontier does not leave much room for sentiment. You bury your dead and keep moving." His voice was matter of fact, but Clara heard the underlying pain. But they all lived full lives. That is something. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Jerome Junction's noise faded to distant piano music from the saloons and the occasional bark of a dog. "Can I ask you something?" Gideon said eventually. "Of course. Why did you really come west?" "I do not doubt you wanted to help people, but there are plenty of women in Philadelphia who need midwives." Clara considered lying or deflecting, but something about Gideon made her want to be honest. "I was engaged to be married. His name was Thomas, and he was everything my aunt wanted for me. Successful, well-connected, from a good family. But he wanted me to give up midwifery once we married. He said it was inappropriate for his wife to be attending births, seeing things proper ladies should not see. He wanted me to host dinner parties and join the right social clubs and produce children without ever actually helping other women do the same. You said no." I said no. He was shocked. He truly could not understand why I would choose my work over security and social position. When I broke the engagement, my aunt told me I was throwing my life away. So I packed everything I owned and headed west. If my life was already thrown away, I figured I might as well throw it somewhere useful. Gideon was quiet for a moment. That took courage, or foolishness. "I am still not sure which. Courage," he said firmly. "Foolishness is staying somewhere you do not belong because you are too scared to leave. Courage is building a new life in a place where nothing is easy." Clara looked at him, seeing sincerity in his expression. "Is that what you are doing?" Building a new life, trying to. I have been drifting for 10 years, never staying anywhere longer than a season or two. But I am tired of drifting. The Verde Valley Ranch is a good place. Mr. Patterson is fair, the land has potential, and I think I could do something meaningful there. Make something that lasts. I hope you do, Clara said and meant it. Gideon stood, dusting off his pants. I should head back. It is a long ride and I need to be up before dawn. Will you be coming back to town soon? Probably next week for more supplies. And to check on you if that is all right. Make sure Charlie is not giving you any more trouble. Clara smiled. That would be all right. She watched him ride away into the darkness, his horse's hoofbeats gradually fading. Mrs. Cooper appeared beside her, arms crossed. That is a good man, the landlady said. I barely know him. I have been judging people's character for 30 years, child. That man has honest eyes and a kind heart. Do not let him slip away. Clara went to bed that night with Gideon's words echoing in her mind. Courage, not foolishness. She liked that. And she liked him, though it seemed impossibly fast to feel this way about someone she had just met. The next week passed in its usual chaos. Clara delivered 2 more babies. One an easy birth that took only 4 hours, the other a difficult breech presentation that required all her skill, and left her shaking with exhaustion afterward. She treated a miner's wife for an infected wound, helped set a child's broken arm, and spent one entire night with a woman suffering a miscarriage, holding her hand and offering what comfort she could. Every day, she found herself thinking about Gideon. It was foolish, she told herself. He was just being friendly, nothing more. But she caught herself watching the road from her window, hoping to see him ride into town. 8 days after they first met, he returned. Clara was coming out of the general store with supplies when she saw him tying his horse to the rail outside. Her heart did an unexpected skip. Gideon, she called out, trying to sound casual. He turned, his face lighting up. Clara, I was hoping I would run into you. How are things at the ranch? Busy. We have been rounding up strays and fixing fences. The work never ends, but that is ranch life. He paused. I was wondering if you might have time for supper tonight. There is a new restaurant that opened up, supposed to have decent food. Nothing fancy, but better than saloon fare. Clara's practical side reminded her that she barely knew this man, that she had sworn off romance to focus on her work. But a louder part of her, the part that had been lonely even in crowds back in Philadelphia, wanted to say yes. I would like that. 6 o'clock. I can meet you at the boarding house. 6 o'clock, she agreed. He smiled, tipped his hat and headed into the store. Clara walked back to the boarding house feeling lighter than she had in months. Mrs. Cooper took one look at her face and started bustling around, insisting on pressing Clara's best dress and lending her a cameo brooch. The restaurant was called the Copper Kettle, a small establishment run by a German couple who had somehow ended up in Jerome Junction. The food was simple but well prepared. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread. Gideon and Clara sat at a corner table, talking easily about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on a ranch, learning to ride before he could properly walk, helping his father drive cattle to market. She told him about Philadelphia, the grand houses and crowded streets, learning midwifery from a woman who had delivered over 1,000 babies. What is it like? Gideon asked. Bringing a life into the world, terrifying and miraculous all at once, Clara said. You hold this tiny person who did not exist moments before, and you know that you helped make that possible. But it is also dangerous. I have lost babies, I have lost mothers. Those nights haunt me, but you keep doing it. Because the alternative is worse. If I am not here, more women and babies die. It is that simple. Gideon reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was unexpected but felt natural. You are remarkable, Clara Richardson. I am just doing my job. No. You are saving lives and bringing hope to people who have precious little of it. That is more than a job. Clara looked at their joined hands, his calloused and rough, hers marked with small scars from needles and knives. Working hands, both of them. Over the next several weeks, Gideon made a point of coming to town at least twice a week. Sometimes they had supper together. Sometimes he just walked her home from a delivery, carrying her medical bag and listening to her talk about her day. Once, he brought her a bouquet of wildflowers he had picked in the valley, slightly wilted from the ride but beautiful nonetheless. Clara found herself falling in love, though she tried to resist it. Love made you vulnerable, made you depend on someone else. She had built a life based on self-sufficiency. But Gideon was patient and kind, never pushing, just steadily present in a way that made her feel seen and valued. One evening in late September, after they had known each other for 2 months, Gideon arrived looking troubled. Clara was sitting on the porch of the boarding house enjoying the cooler evening air. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. He sat beside her, his usual easy manner strained. "Mr. Patterson wants to sell the ranch." Clara felt her stomach drop. "Why? His wife is sick. Consumption. She needs to go to a sanatorium in California, somewhere with ocean air. He cannot run the ranch and care for her. He offered to sell it to me for a fair price, but I do not have that kind of money saved." "How much?" Gideon named a figure that made Clara wince. It was substantial, more than either of them could earn in years. "He is giving me first option, but I have to decide within a month. If I cannot buy it, he will sell to whoever makes an offer, and that will likely be the mining company. They want the water rights and do not care about the cattle." "Would they keep you on as foreman?" "Doubtful. They would probably clear the land for equipment and mining operations." Gideon ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know I should just find another position somewhere else, but Clara, that ranch is exactly what I have been looking for. Good land, water, room to grow. I could build something real there. Then find a way to buy it. With what money? I have saved some, but not nearly enough." They sat in troubled silence. Clara thought about her own small savings, money she had carefully hoarded for emergencies. It was not much, certainly not enough to make a difference in purchasing a ranch, but the defeated look on Gideon's face made her heart ache. "There has to be a solution," she said. "Maybe you could find investors, other ranchers who would want to prevent the mining company from taking the land." "Maybe I will ask around." He took her hand. "I am sorry for burdening you with this. Do not apologize. I care about what happens to you." Gideon looked at her intently. "Do you care about me, I mean?" Clara's breath caught. They had been dancing around this question for weeks. "Yes, I do. I am falling in love with you, Clara. I have been since the day I met you, if I am honest. You are smart and brave and dedicated to helping people. You see a world that needs changing and you wade right in to change it. I have never met anyone like you." "Gideon," she whispered, her heart racing. "I know this is fast. I know we come from different places and want different things. But I also know that I think about you every moment of every day. When I am working, I imagine telling you about it. When something good happens, you are the first person I want to share it with. If I lose the ranch, that will hurt, but losing you would be worse." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too. I did not want to. I came here to focus on my work, to build a life on my own terms. But you make me want things I thought I had given up on." He cupped her face gently. "What things?" "Partnership, someone to come home to, a future that includes more than just work." She leaned into his touch. "I am scared, Gideon. What if we are wrong about this? What if it does not work?" "What if it does?" He smiled. "I am scared too. But I would rather be scared and try than safe and always wonder what might have been." He kissed her then, soft and careful, and Clara felt something inside her click into place. This was what she had been missing, what she had not even known she needed. Not romance for its own sake, not security or social position, but real connection with someone who saw her clearly and loved what he saw. When they pulled apart, Clara was smiling. "We will figure out the ranch situation, somehow. Together. The next few weeks were challenging. Gideon spent his days working the ranch, and his evenings trying to find investors or alternative funding. Clara continued her midwifery work, but now every spare moment was spent discussing possibilities with Gideon, helping him draft proposals, and making connections with people in town who might help. It was during a difficult delivery in early October that an unexpected solution presented itself. Clara had been called to attend to Mrs. Patterson, the ranch owner's wife, who had gone into premature labor. The woman was weak from consumption, and Clara was terrified she would lose both mother and child. She worked through the night, using every technique she knew, every trick she had learned in years of practice. The baby came early, small but alive, crying lustily as Clara cleared his airway. Mrs. Patterson was hemorrhaging, and Clara worked frantically to stop the bleeding, packing the wound and administering herbs she had brought for just this purpose. By dawn, both mother and child were stable. Exhausted, Clara finally sat back, her hands shaking from tension and fatigue. Mr. Patterson, who had been pacing outside the bedroom, came in with tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he choked out. "Thank you. The doctor said she would die if she got pregnant again, but when it happened, he said there was nothing to be done. You saved them both." "They are not out of danger yet," Clara cautioned. "Your wife needs complete rest and careful monitoring. The baby is small and will need special care. Whatever you need, whatever it costs, name your price." Clara hesitated. It felt wrong to ask for payment beyond her usual fee at a moment like this. But she thought of Gideon, of the ranch, of the future they both wanted. "Mr. Patterson, you offered to sell the ranch to Gideon Lewis. He wants to buy it more than anything, but he does not have the full price. If you truly want to repay me, give him time to gather the money. Extend the deadline, let him find investors, do not sell to the mining company just yet." Mr. Patterson looked surprised, then thoughtful. "That is all you want? More time? And maybe consider lowering the price a bit if you can. Not charity, just a fair deal for a man who has worked hard for you and loves that land." "Done. I will give him 6 more months and knock off 15%. That is the best I can do if I am going to afford the sanatorium for my wife." "That is more than fair. Thank you." Clara stayed with Mrs. Patterson for 3 more days, sleeping in snatches and monitoring both mother and child constantly. The baby, whom they named Thomas, was fragile but growing stronger. Mrs. Patterson's bleeding stopped and her color improved. When Clara finally felt safe leaving them in the care of a woman hired as a nurse, she was so tired she could barely walk. Gideon met her outside the ranch house, having heard the news from Mr. Patterson. He swept her into his arms, holding her tightly. "You did not have to do that," he said. "Use your payment for me." "I wanted to. We are in this together, remember, 6 months, and a lower price. Clara, that changes everything. I can get investors with that kind of time. I can make this work." "We can make this work," she corrected. He kissed her, not caring that they were standing in full view of the ranch hands. "Marry me, Clara Richardson. I know it is fast, I know we have obstacles ahead, but marry me anyway. Build this life with me." Clara pulled back, startled. "What? Marry me? I love you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build the ranch and support your midwifery and raise children who are as stubborn and brave as their mother. Marry me." Clara's practical mind listed all the reasons to say no. They had known each other less than 3 months. Marriage was complicated. She would have to leave the boarding house, figure out how to continue her midwifery work while living on a remote ranch. But her heart, the part of her that had learned to trust Gideon's steadiness and kindness, already knew the answer. Yes, yes, I will marry you. They were married 3 weeks later in Jerome Junction's small church. Mrs. Cooper cried throughout the ceremony. Miss Hartley played piano. Mr. Patterson and his wife attended despite her weakness, bringing baby Thomas, who slept peacefully through the vows. Clara wore a simple cream-colored dress that the widow from the boarding house had sewn. Gideon wore his best shirt and a new jacket. The circuit judge, who traveled through Arizona territory, once a month performed the ceremony. Do you, Gideon Lewis, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Gideon said clearly, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. And do you, Clara Richardson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Clara said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Gideon kissed her gently, sweetly, and the small gathering applauded. Clara felt a rush of joy so intense it almost frightened her. She had not expected this. When she came west, she had expected hard work, loneliness, and the satisfaction of meaningful labor. She had not expected love, partnership, or the feeling of coming home that swept through her as Gideon took her hand. They spent their wedding night at the ranch in the foreman's house, a small but sturdy cabin with 2 rooms and a fireplace. Gideon had spent the past week making it as comfortable as possible, adding curtains, repairing the roof, building new furniture. Clara was touched by the care he had taken. It is not much, he said as he carried her over the threshold, but it is ours. It is perfect, Clara said and meant it. Their first months of marriage were an adjustment. Clara continued her midwifery work, but now she had to travel from the ranch instead of from town. Gideon bought her a gentle mare and taught her to ride better, so she could make the 8-mile journey more safely. He also built a small clinic addition onto the cabin, a room where Clara could see patients and store her supplies. Meanwhile, Gideon worked tirelessly to gather investors for the ranch purchase. He partnered with 2 other local ranchers who were interested in preventing the mining company from controlling more land. Together, they formed an agreement. They would jointly purchase the Verde Valley Ranch, with Gideon maintaining majority ownership and management control, while the other ranchers benefited from shared water rights and grazing land. In March of 1884, exactly 6 months after Mr. Patterson's offer, Gideon finalized the purchase. Clara stood beside him as he signed the papers, her hand resting on her slightly swollen belly. She was 3 months pregnant, a development that thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. We did it, Gideon said, pulling her close after the papers were signed. The ranch is ours. Yours, Clara corrected. I just provided motivation. Ours, he insisted. Everything I have is yours, Clara, you know that. The pregnancy was difficult. Clara knew the risks of childbirth better than anyone, had seen too many women die or suffer complications. She tried not to let fear control her, but as her belly grew, so did her anxiety. Gideon was endlessly patient, holding her when nightmares woke her, rubbing her aching back and listening to her fears without dismissing them. You are the best midwife in the territory, he reminded her. You know what to do, and I will be right there with you. Men do not attend births. This man does. You are not going through this alone. In July, Clara went into labor. She had arranged for an experienced midwife from Prescott to attend, a woman named Mary who had 30 years of experience. But labor came on suddenly and fast, and there was no time to send for Mary. Gideon stayed calm, following Clara's instructions exactly. She coached him through what to do, though pain kept interrupting her words. It was the strangest experience of her life, being on the other side of a delivery, feeling her body doing what she had watched countless other bodies do. "I can see the head," Gideon said, his voice shaking slightly. "Clara, our baby is almost here." "Help guide it," Clara panted. "Gently support the head." Gideon did as she instructed, his hands surprisingly steady. And then, with a final push that left Clara sobbing with effort and relief, their son was born. Gideon caught him, clearing his airway as Clara had taught him, and the baby's cry filled the cabin. "It is a boy," Gideon said, tears streaming down his face. "Clara, we have a son." He placed the baby on Clara's chest, and she held him with shaking hands, this tiny perfect person they had created together. The baby had dark hair and his father's nose, and when he opened his eyes, they were a cloudy blue that would likely darken with time. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered. "Welcome to the world." They named him James, after Gideon's father. Clara recovered well from the birth, though it took several weeks before she felt like herself again. During that time, Gideon took over all her midwifery duties, riding into town to fetch her when someone was in labor and helping however he could while she worked. "You are becoming quite the birth expert," Clara teased after he successfully helped her with a difficult delivery. "I have an excellent teacher, but I am happy to remain your assistant. The actual midwifery is your domain." Life settled into a busy but satisfying rhythm. The ranch thrived under Gideon's management. He expanded the herd, improved the grazing land, and built a reputation for producing quality cattle. Clara continued her midwifery work, now with James strapped to her back in a sling when he was small, and later left in the care of a young Mexican woman named Rosa who worked at the ranch. Jerome Junction continued to grow and change around them. The mines produced more copper, bringing more people and more chaos. But Clara and Gideon built their own world at the Verde Valley Ranch, a place of relative peace and purpose. When James was 2, Clara became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier, and she felt more confident. Their daughter, Grace, was born in the spring of 1887, delivered by Mary the midwife while Gideon paced outside and James played with wooden toys. Grace was a calm baby, the opposite of her active brother, with Clara's dark curls and Gideon's sage green eyes. Clara loved watching Gideon with their children, seeing his gentleness and patience. He taught James to ride, let Grace toddle after him as he did chores, and read to both of them every night from the few books they owned. "You are a good father," Clara told him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. "I am trying. My father was a good man, but he was hard. I want our children to know they are loved, not just provided for." "They know," Clara assured him. In the summer of 1889, tragedy struck Jerome Junction. A fire started in one of the mines and spread rapidly through the dry wooden buildings of the town. Dozens of people were killed and many more were injured or left homeless. Clara worked for days without sleep, treating burns and smoke inhalation, helping where she could. The fire devastated the town, but it also brought out unexpected resilience. People rebuilt, learned from their mistakes, and constructed buildings with more stone and less wood. New families moved in to replace those who had left or died. Jerome Junction survived, tougher and more determined than before. Through it all, the Verde Valley Ranch remained a constant. Gideon had spent years building fire breaks and keeping the land cleared of dry brush, precautions that proved invaluable. The ranch became a refuge for some families who lost their homes, Gideon and Clara offering whatever help they could spare. "We have been blessed," Clara said one night, exhausted from caring for burn victims. "We have to share that blessing." "Always," Gideon agreed. By 1892, James was 8 and Grace was 5. Clara was 33 and Gideon 35. They had been married for 8 years, and Clara could not imagine her life any other way. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Clara's midwifery practice had expanded too, with women traveling from as far as Flagstaff to have her attend their births. One autumn evening, after the children were asleep, Clara and Gideon sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Gideon asked. Clara considered the question. "Sometimes I miss certain things, the libraries, the medical supplies that were easy to obtain, the symphony on Sunday afternoons. But no, I do not miss the life I had there. That was not really living, it was performing. And this is living, this is living. Hard work and dirty hands and children who track mud through the house. Bringing babies into the world and losing sleep and never quite having enough water. Loving you and building this life together. Yes, this is living." Gideon took her hand, their fingers intertwining in a familiar gesture. "I was thinking about something." "What?" "The clinic you have in the cabin is getting too small. Women are traveling farther to see you and you need more space. What if we built a proper clinic on the ranch? Something big enough for you to see patients, deliver babies if needed, maybe even train other midwives eventually." Clara turned to look at him, her heart swelling. "That would be expensive. The ranch needs every penny for expansion. The ranch is doing well enough, and this is important." "You are saving lives, Clara. You should have the tools and space to do that properly. Besides, I am not suggesting this just for you. A clinic would serve everyone in the area. It would be good for the whole community." "You really mean this?" "I really do. We can start building in the spring." "I have already sketched out some plans, but I wanted your input on what you would need." Clara kissed him, pouring years of gratitude and love into the gesture. Gideon was her partner in every sense, supporting her dreams as much as his own, understanding that her work mattered just as much as the ranch. Construction on the clinic began in April of 1893. It was a modest building, but well designed, with a waiting area, an examination room, a birthing room with a proper bed and medical equipment, and storage for supplies. Gideon and the ranch hands built it themselves, with Clara offering suggestions and modifications as it took shape. The clinic opened in July, and within weeks, it was clear they had filled a desperate need. Women came from all over the territory, some traveling for days to reach the Verde Valley Ranch. Clara hired 2 assistants, young women she trained in basic midwifery and patient care. She taught them to read medical texts, to recognize complications, to stay calm in emergencies. "You are building something that will outlast us," Gideon observed one evening as Clara reviewed her notes on recent deliveries. "That is the idea. I will not be able to do this forever. But if I can train others, the work continues." In 1895, Arizona Territory's Medical Board officially recognized Clara's clinic and training program. It was a significant achievement, validation of her years of work and dedication. A small ceremony was held in Jerome Junction, with the territorial governor presenting Clara with a certificate of commendation. "Mrs. Lewis has brought hope and healing to countless families," the governor said in his speech. "Her dedication to maternal and infant health has saved lives and raised the standard of medical care in this territory. We are proud to officially recognize her contributions." Clara stood on the small stage in her best dress, overwhelmed by the recognition. She looked out at the crowd and saw Gideon standing with James and Grace, all three of them beaming with pride. Mrs. Cooper was there, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Many of the women whose babies Clara had delivered attended, some with children now old enough to understand what was happening. This was what she had wanted all along, Clara realized. Not fame or accolades, but the ability to make a real difference, to build something meaningful. And she had done it, not alone but with Gideon's steady support and partnership. That night back at the ranch, they celebrated quietly. The children were finally asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Clara and Gideon sat in their usual spot on the porch, her head resting on his shoulder. 13 years ago, I was trying to escape a life that felt like a cage, Clara said softly. I thought I was running away, but I was really running toward this, toward you, toward the life we built together. I was drifting, Gideon replied. No direction, no purpose beyond the next job. Then I met a stubborn midwife who was not impressed by me at all, and suddenly I had a reason to stay in one place. Clara laughed. I was impressed. I just did not want to admit it. I knew you were special the first time I saw you. Walking through that rough part of town like you owned it, covered in dust and blood, carrying that heavy medical bag and not caring what anyone thought. You were the bravest person I had ever met. You were pretty brave yourself, standing up to a drunk miner when you could have just walked past. I could not walk past you, Clara. Not then, not ever. In 1897, their third child was born, another son they named William. He came into the world easily, delivered by one of Clara's trained assistants while Clara coached from her position on the bed. At 38, she had worried about complications, but William was healthy and strong from the start. James was 13 now, tall and serious, already helping his father with ranch work. Grace was 10, sweet-natured and fascinated by her mother's medical work. She spent hours at the clinic, watching deliveries and learning everything she could. I think Grace is going to be a midwife, Clara told Gideon one evening. Would that make you happy, very happy, and proud, but only if it is truly what she wants, not just what she thinks I want. She is your daughter, she knows her own mind. Life continued its steady pace through the turn of the century. Jerome Junction survived several more fires, floods, and mining disasters. The clinic on the Verde Valley Ranch became an institution, training dozens of midwives who went on to serve communities throughout the territory. Clara's reputation spread, and she received invitations to speak at medical conferences, though she rarely accepted, preferring to stay close to home and work. Gideon's ranch prospered. The cattle operation expanded, and he became a leader in local ranching associations, advocating for sustainable grazing practices and fair water rights. He was respected throughout the territory, known as a man whose word was good and whose handshake was binding. In 1902, James left home to attend university in California, studying veterinary medicine. It was hard to let him go, but Clara and Gideon were proud of his ambition. Grace continued her midwifery training, working alongside her mother and showing remarkable skill. William, at 5, was the wild one, always climbing trees and chasing animals, keeping everyone on their toes. 3 children, a thriving ranch, a clinic that serves the whole territory, Gideon mused one evening. Not bad for a drifting cowboy and a runaway midwife. Not bad at all, Clara agreed. They were in their 40s now, with silver threads appearing in their hair and lines around their eyes. But Clara still felt that skip in her heart when Gideon smiled at her, still reached for his hand automatically, still found comfort in his steady presence. In the winter of 1905, Mrs. Cooper passed away peacefully in her sleep. Clara was devastated. The landlady had been more than a friend. She had been a surrogate mother, someone who believed in Clara when she barely believed in herself. They buried her in Jerome Junction cemetery, and Clara planted wildflowers on the grave, the same kind Gideon had brought her on their first courtship. "She would have been proud of you," Gideon said as they stood by the grave. "Everything you have accomplished, the family you built, the lives you have saved. She knew you were special from the beginning." "She knew we were special," Clara corrected. "She is the one who invited you to dinner that first day. She saw something before we did." Wise woman. In 1908, Arizona Territory moved closer to statehood. There was talk of modernization, new regulations, changes to the frontier way of life. Some people worried about what that would mean. Clara and Gideon welcomed it. Progress meant better medical supplies, improved infrastructure, more opportunities for their children. James returned from university as a qualified veterinarian and opened a practice in Prescott, serving ranchers throughout the region. He married a teacher named Elizabeth, and they had their first child in 1909, a daughter they named Clara. Grace officially took over much of the day-to-day operation of the clinic, though Clara remained active and involved. At 50, Clara was still delivering babies, still training midwives, still working to improve maternal health throughout the territory. But she was also learning to step back, to trust the next generation. William, at 12, announced his intention to become a lawyer and fight for statehood. His passion and idealism reminded Clara of herself at that age, determined to change the world through sheer force of will. "He gets that from you," Gideon teased. "He gets the stubbornness from both of us," Clara retorted. In February 1912, Arizona achieved statehood, becoming the 48th state in the Union. It was a momentous occasion, celebrated throughout the former territory. The Verde Valley Ranch hosted a party for neighboring ranchers and families from Jerome Junction, now officially Jerome, Arizona. Clara stood with Gideon, watching their community celebrate, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. They had built this. Not just the ranch or the clinic, but something larger. A community where people looked out for each other, where women could access quality medical care, where children grew up with opportunities their parents never had. It was not perfect, still rough and challenging in many ways, but it was good. It was real. 30 years, Gideon said, wrapping his arm around Clara's waist. 30 years since I first saw you walking through Jerome Junction, covered in dust and fierce as a wildcat. 28 years married. Best 28 years of my life. Clara leaned into him, comfortable and content. Mine too. As they grew older, Clara and Gideon gradually passed their responsibilities to the next generation. Grace took complete control of the clinic in 1915, running it with the same dedication her mother had shown. James's veterinary practice thrived, and he began training younger veterinarians. William went east to law school, returning in 1918 to practice law in Phoenix. Clara and Gideon spent more time on the ranch, enjoying their grandchildren and each other's company. They had 7 grandchildren by 1920. James and Elizabeth had 3 daughters. Grace married a rancher named Thomas and had 2 sons and a daughter, and William married a suffragist named Sarah and had 1 son. Clara was 61, Gideon 64. They were healthy and active, still working the ranch together, but they also took time to simply enjoy life. Long rides through the valley, quiet evenings reading together, traveling to visit their children and grandchildren. One spring evening in 1921, they sat in their usual spot on the porch. The ranch looked much different than it had when they started. More buildings, better fences, irrigated fields. The clinic had expanded twice and now included a small hospital wing. Jerome had recovered from multiple disasters and continued to grow, though the mining boom had long since peaked. "Do you have any regrets?" Clara asked Gideon suddenly. He considered the question seriously. "I regret that I did not meet you sooner. Everything good in my life started the day you walked into it. Beyond that, no regrets." "I spent so much of my early life afraid," Clara admitted. "Afraid of being trapped, afraid of depending on someone, afraid of losing my independence. I thought marriage would be a cage. And was it? No, it was freedom. Freedom to be completely myself, to build the life I wanted, knowing you would support me every step of the way. You gave me wings, Gideon Lewis. Every single day you gave me wings." Gideon took her hand, their fingers intertwining in that familiar gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "You gave me purpose, a reason to stop drifting and start building. You made me believe I could be more than just a hired hand moving from place to place." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and purple. 38 years since they first met. 28 years of marriage. A lifetime of work and love and purpose. In 1925, Clara officially retired from midwifery at the age of 66, though she remained a consultant and teacher. Grace had proven more than capable of running the clinic, and a new generation of trained midwives served communities throughout Arizona. The clinic had delivered over 5,000 babies since opening, and not a single mother had died in childbirth within its walls in over a decade, a remarkable achievement for the time. Gideon, at 68, handed over ranch management to a partnership between William and several trusted ranch hands. He and Clara remained on the property in a comfortable house they had built near the original foreman's cabin, which had been converted into storage. Their golden years were peaceful. They traveled some, visiting children and grandchildren, seeing parts of the country they had never explored. They attended graduations, weddings, and births. They watched their legacy grow and spread, the ranch and clinic continuing to serve their community. On a warm evening in August 1932, Clara and Gideon celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a party at the ranch, and over 200 people attended. Women whose lives Clara had saved, children she had delivered who now had children of their own, ranchers who had worked with Gideon, midwives Clara had trained. Grace gave a speech, her voice strong and clear. "My mother came to Arizona Territory in 1883 as a young woman with a calling and not much else. She found a harsh land that needed her skills desperately. She found a cowboy who saw her strength and loved her for it. Together, they built something that changed countless lives. The Verde Valley Clinic has trained over 80 midwives and delivered thousands of babies safely. The ranch has provided employment and support to hundreds of families. But more than that, my parents built a partnership based on mutual respect and love. They showed us all what marriage could be at its best." Clara, 73 now, stood beside Gideon, 76, their hands joined as they had been for 50 years. She looked at her family, her community, the legacy they had built together, and felt profound gratitude. "I came here looking for a place to belong," she said when Grace finished. "I found so much more. I found home. I found family. I found a man who delivered his heart to me and never asked for it back. Thank you all for being part of our journey." They danced that night, slowly and carefully, but still with joy. The same joy that had carried them through decades of hard work, challenges, losses, and triumphs. Clara and Gideon lived well into their 80s, a remarkable age for their generation. They remained active and engaged, spending their final years surrounded by family. Clara passed peacefully in her sleep in January 1940, at the age of 81. Gideon followed exactly 3 months later, as if he could not bear to be parted from her for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the Verde Valley Ranch, with a simple shared headstone that read, "Clara and Gideon Lewis." She delivered hope. He delivered his heart. Together they delivered a legacy of love. The ranch continued for generations, eventually becoming a historic landmark. The clinic expanded into a full hospital, recognized throughout Arizona for its excellent maternal care. The Richardson-Lewis training program for midwives still operates today, carrying on Clara's mission of ensuring safe childbirth for all women. But perhaps their greatest legacy was simpler than buildings or institutions. It was the example they set of two people who found each other against all odds in a harsh land, who built a partnership based on equality and respect, who supported each other's dreams and worked together to make those dreams reality. Clara had come west to escape a cage, expecting loneliness and hard work. Instead, she found freedom, purpose, and a love that lasted a lifetime. Gideon had been drifting, rootless and searching, until a fierce midwife showed him what it meant to build something permanent. Their children and grandchildren told their story for years afterward. About the midwife who delivered hope daily to families throughout Arizona territory. About the cowboy who delivered his heart straight to her door and never asked for it back. About two remarkable people who chose each other, chose their hard but beautiful life together, and in doing so, changed their corner of the world for the better. Years after they were gone, people still visited their grave on that hill. Women who had been born at the Verde Valley Clinic, descendants of the families they had helped, historians studying frontier medicine. They came to pay respects to two people who had lived fully and loved completely, who had taken the Wild West at its wildest and carved out a space for compassion, partnership, and enduring devotion. The land they loved stretched out below, still beautiful and harsh, still demanding everything from those who called it home. But it was also rich with the legacy of people like Clara and Gideon, who had chosen to stay and build rather than merely survive, who had chosen love over loneliness, community over isolation. Their story became legend, the kind told to young couples starting out, to women training as midwives, to anyone who needed to believe that love could thrive even in the hardest circumstances. That two people, if they truly committed to each other, could build something lasting and meaningful. That courage looked like a woman heading west alone with nothing but her skills and determination. That romance looked like a cowboy carrying a midwife's heavy medical bag and learning to deliver babies alongside her. In the end, Clara and Gideon's story was simple and profound all at once. It was about hope delivered daily, hearts delivered honestly, and a love that lasted not just a lifetime but generations beyond. It was about building something real in a place where nothing came easy, about partnership between equals, about finding home not in a place but in another person. The Wild West had been wild indeed, full of danger and hardship, dreams and disappointments. But for Clara Richardson and Gideon Lewis, it had also been the place where they found each other, built their future, and lived out their love story in all its beautiful, challenging, enduring glory. And that, perhaps, was the most remarkable legacy of all.